To former FDA Commissioner and Pfizer board member, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who joins us from Westport, Connecticut. Good morning to you, Doctor.
Good morning.
I want to get to kids in a moment. I've got a lot I want to ask you about there, but let's start on the masks. Put the legal argument aside. As a medical professional, when you get on a plane, are you still going to put a mask on?
I wear a mask when I get on a plane while I'm boarding and also while I'm getting off the plane. I think those are the 2 points where you're in a congregate setting where there's poor air circulation. Those really are the risky venues. Those are the risky points in your journey. When you're up in the air, when you're at 10,000 feet, there's pretty good air filtration on a plane, so I don't feel at risk at that moment, so I take my mask off while we're flying. That's been my practice since this mandate got lifted. That's probably what I'm going to continue to do so long as prevalence remains where it is right now.
And to be clear, when you say mask, you mean an N95?
Yeah, look, I wear a high-quality mask. I wear a KN95 mask. I think if you're wearing a poor quality mask, a cloth mask, or a procedure mask that's not a level 3 procedure mask, you're probably deriving a lot less protection than what you perceive. Omicron is an airborne pathogen at this point. It's spreading through airborne transmission. A cloth mask isn't providing a measurable degree of protection. So if you yourself want to protect yourself from this pathogen, you really need to wear a well-fitted, higher quality mask.
Big picture, according to HHS, we are still in a public health emergency. Are we yet at an endemic phase of this?
No, I don't. I think this year is really a transition year. I think this is going to be the year when this becomes more of an endemic illness. It's not going to be a defined point in time when that happens. But what's going to happen is this is going to settle into more of a seasonal pattern. I do expect prevalence levels to start to decline. We may be peaking right now if you look at the wastewater data. Hopefully over the summer, through the summer, we have pretty low prevalence of this infection, and then we're going to see it reemerge in the fall. The question is what reemerges? Is it a new strain of Omicron? And that's going to drive decisions around the vaccine.
And fall makes kids' vaccines even more timely. So stay with us. We're going to take this break and come back and finish our conversation with Dr. Gottlieb. Welcome back to Face the Nation. We continue our conversation now with former FDA Commissioner Dr. Scott Gottlieb, who's also on the board of Pfizer. So, Dr. Gottlieb, when I heard the mask mandate being lifted on transportation, I thought of my 1-year-old who I don't want to put on a train and I don't want to put on a plane because I can't put a mask on him and he is not vaccinated. What are parents of the youngest Americans supposed to do? Not travel?
Look, this is a really difficult situation because we're effectively saying that people need to take matters into their own hands in terms of protecting themselves. We're no longer applying mandates on the entire population, but asking people to individually assess their own risk, but not giving everyone the tools they need to do that, particularly young kids who now are going to be made vulnerable in these public settings, but there's no vaccine available for those kids. And I know a lot of parents have been waiting a very long time. There's kids with health conditions that can't get the benefit of a vaccine that could provide them some baseline immunity that could protect them from severe disease. And I think we need to try to make a vaccine available to those children very soon. In terms of where this stands right now, I'll take each application in turn. Pfizer, as you know, submitted about 4 months ago the data on their 2-dose vaccine. The FDA has had that data for about 4 months and has had the benefit of reviewing it. They deferred making a decision on that vaccine. They didn't feel it reached the level of efficacy that they had prescribed, which was a threshold of 50% effectiveness of preventing symptomatic disease. And so Pfizer is now testing a 3rd dose to see if that will boost the effectiveness of the overall regimen. And the data from that should be available very soon. Moderna released top-line data on their vaccine on March 23rd, their 2-dose vaccine, and the public reports are they're going to file this week. My expectation is that FDA is going to hold an advisory committee in early June to discuss one or both of these applications. That gives the agency about 6 weeks to review the Moderna application, which is consistent with how long the agency has taken to review these applications. It took them 5 weeks to review Pfizer's 5 to 11 application. And I'm hoping that Pfizer will have all their data in time to also be considered at that advisory committee. But just in closing, if the Moderna application is ready and the Pfizer application is not, I think the FDA would and should consider it separately.
Well, that's an important point to make because there was reporting, as you know, in Politico this week that there were conversations within the Biden administration worrying if you authorize one vaccine before the others that it'll confuse parents. But with adults, one vaccine was authorized and made available before the other. So Is that flawed thinking? Do you know if there's any truth to that reporting?
Well, look, I don't agree with the thinking, but when I just look at the timeline that's laid out here, if you believe that they are going to hold an advisory committee in early June, that's been long rumored. That meeting was supposed to be planned to consider a bivalent vaccine, the Omicron-specific vaccine, and the consideration of the childhood vaccine is going to get latched onto that meeting. If you consider that timeline, that gives them about 6 weeks to review the Moderna application, and I believe that Pfizer is going to have their data in sufficient time to also meet that deadline. 6 weeks is about what the agency has been taking. They've been reviewing these applications in four to 5 weeks. Having an AdCom does add additional time. It's going to add an additional week or two. The final point I would make is the question of why are they bringing it before the advisory committee? And that raises the broader question here of whether or not the agency is going to consider vaccines that don't reach their 50% threshold approvable. The reason they deferred, at least in part, the reason they deferred the Pfizer vaccine previously is it didn't meet that threshold. So this is going to be controversial before the advisory committee. That's why they're taking it before that AdCom. I hope there's a favorable outcome for one or both of these vaccines, but I do expect there to be some pushback among those members.
When we spoke back in January about where Pfizer was with its submission, you did make the argument that it might be advisable to make just 2 doses available while they looked at a third, because some protection is better than none. Is the FDA thinking that way? You mentioned a 50% efficacy rate. If the data isn't meeting that benchmark, should these vaccines still be approved?
Well, the data won't reach that benchmark. The Moderna data is about 40% in the data that they released. The Pfizer data, the previous data was about 40% as well. We'll see if the third dose provides additional protection on top of that. But we know these vaccines aren't working very well against Omicron at preventing symptomatic disease. I do believe from a clinical standpoint there's value in getting baseline immunity into children, even if you're not going to fully protect them against symptomatic illness. If you could protect them against severe disease and hospitalization, that provides a lot of value, especially children who are vulnerable, who have health conditions. So I think for FDA to authorize these vaccines, they're going to have to come to that view as well, because these vaccines are not going to meet their pre-specified target of providing 50% efficacy. We know that right now. I mean, it's possible that the third dose of the Pfizer vaccine will reach that benchmark. I don't think that's going to be the case, because I don't think there'll be enough symptomatic cases in that data set to evaluate.
This is an important conversation. We're going to continue to have it and watch what the FDA does very carefully. Thank you very much.